Welcome to Meet the Author, where you can join in on insightful conversations with best-selling and award-winning indie published authors. Your hosts today are Rob and Joan, who themselves are indie published authors, book publicists, and paranormal investigators with Tampa Bay Spirits, based in Tampa Bay, Florida. Thanks for dropping by. And now, on with the show.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Rob.
I'm Joan. We're glad that you're here to watch and listen, whether you're watching us live or you're listening to us later on. We're really glad that you chose to listen to our show and to tune in. We appreciate it. Also, let me remind you, and I'm really bad about reminding you to do this, but go over to our YouTube channel. What's the name of it?
Meet the Author Podcast.
Oh, yeah. Meet the Author Podcast. And give us, if you haven't already subscribed, subscribe. Give us a like, and we love to have your comments. Oh, yay. Marjorie's in the house.
Hey, Marjorie.
Daring. Hi, all. Strapped in and ready to go. Well, we're glad that you're here.
We don't want you to fall out of your chair.
Yeah. You might, though.
You might.
Joe Conjal says, Happy New Year, Rob and Joan. Happy New Year, Joe. Joe, I'm so glad that you're here. I hope you all had a happy New Year.
Yeah.
We had a very loud one.
We did. They had us surrounded out here.
Yeah. We didn't need to go anywhere for fireworks. We just walked outside and it was a 360.
All around us, yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So George Dismukes, I had trouble reading that, George, says, okay, I'm here, cervically pober and ready to blast off. Perfectly sober is what he's saying. Oh, look at who's here.
Hey, Becca.
Lonnie and Becca Jones. Well, it might just be Becca. Hello, Happy New Year. I will subscribe to your YouTube. Thanks, yes, Becca. Do that.
That would be helpful.
Yes. And do comment. We really love to hear your comments, see your comment. I know our authors do. We want to remind you that if you read a book, to review a book. It's very important to our authors. And also, all of these wonderful authors that you meet on our show, buy their book.
Yeah. And if you hear this podcast later on down the road and you like it, and it wouldn't hurt for you if you're in another country or even here in the U.S. to just send us an email, carternovels@aol.com, and let us know. Let us know how you like it.
Yeah.
Or if you don't like it.
Yeah.
But if you don't like it, let us know why so we can change or fix it. Or
maybe.
Well, at least we'll have a clue what's going on, right? I want to remind everybody about the Voice of Indie podcast tonight, of course, every Wednesday night after our show. It's on blogtalkradio.com. We have all the instructions on our last commercial of the show. After we sign off, we play that, and it gives you detailed instructions on how to get to Voice of Indie podcast. That's Beam Weeks and Gary G's, really good people. This week's guest is B.A. Johnson, and I think we have a
we do.
Little
right
there. For there. Here we go. This week's guest is B.A. Johnson, and she's an author, I believe.
I think she could be.
Right. The other thing I wanted to mention, if you could bring up Siren Hunter.
Sure.
The Siren Hunter is part 3 in the Siren Song series written by George Dismukes. It's going to launch still in February, but as you can see there's the email. If you want to pre-order a copy, you can get it now for only $12. You don't have to pay now. Just get your name on the list. And that's his lovely wife, Nadine, on the cover.
Maynard International at yahoo.com, and that's INTL.
Okay.
Abbreviated.
This Saturday, I want to remind everybody about Episode Rewind. Catch that right where you're watching right now. It's a replay from last year. Doug Cooper is the sci-fi author that's on. He's the author of the Crystal series. Very interesting show.
Yeah, all of you authors out there that are big on Twitter, you know who Doug Cooper is.
Yeah. And next week we have 2 authors in one. Now, how could that be? Well, the author is Robin Maidrich. She's a romance author, but she also writes under the name of Joe Allen Ash. and she's a young adult author. And she wrote a young adult dystopian sci-fi fantasy, The Shadows We Make. And her romance series is the Connor Falls Christmas series, I believe. So that should be an interesting show.
Yeah.
And what else do we have? Anything else?
We have a New York Times bestseller waiting backstage.
You're kidding.
No.
Well, maybe we should not
Bring
keep him waiting any longer then, right?
I agree.
Okay. Ron Franscell, welcome aboard.
Hey, thank you for having me. What a treat.
Thank you for being here.
It's a treat to have you on with us.
I know. I think it's great.
So you're talking to
Sitting here backstage thinking I should have a pseudonym and write all kinds of other marvelous things besides.
Yes. AKA.
AKA. There you go.
That's a big discussion here, whether you should, write under your name or a pseudonym, and whether you should write under your one name, for all the genres that you're writing in. I mean, we discuss this a lot. I'm pro brand yourself, keep that brand no matter what genre you're doing, because,
eventually
that's what I think.
Catch on, hopefully.
Yes. Yeah.
I think if you're successful with your name or any name for that matter, stick with it.
Keep it.
Yeah, I agree.
And we've been talking about that very thing, and we're going to talk about it tonight. The idea that my bones have been made writing true crime, but here I am about to launch a crime fiction. And the question is, will the people who've loved Ron Franscell's true crime follow into crime fiction? If so, well, then no pseudonym needed.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm sure that they will.
Well,
I think so.
I think so too. I think I told you that some of our daughters are avid true crime aficionados. And, but they also read a lot of fiction and nonfiction. So, I don't think it matters to readers.
It could be a whole new market that wants to be associated, or at least to meet me and see what I'm putting out there, and that's good. As long as I don't mess with them and I don't betray them, then that's a good thing too. It'll just be that moment when it comes out and people say, "Oh, well, Ron Franscell writes true crime." It's like typecasting in Hollywood. We've grown so accustomed to seeing one actor, let's say, who is always comedic and is always funny, but he really wants to do Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Well, will we be able to handle him doing Shakespeare? And that becomes the great question. So,
and you know what? We can handle that if he's good at it.
I think you're right.
Because we've seen that. And if they stink at it, you're like, yeah, you should stay with comedy. But, I think that if they do it well, and I am sure that you do it well, then you should do what you want to do. What makes you
about to find out, aren't we?
We are. Joe Conjal says, I'm with you, Joan. Plus, you work so hard to get meaning keep your own name. I'm with you, Joan. Plus, you work so hard to get the books out there that I want people to know it's me. LOL.
Yeah, you gotta get the credit. That's for sure.
It's me. I'm Joe
That's
Conjal.
right. That's right.
That. Yeah.
So,
well, it's awfully hard too. I think that one interesting thing that we might talk about later is that the great bulk of buyers of books today in the United States are women. In true crime, it's as many as 4 out of 5 books get sold to women.
Oh,
so one could argue that having a woman's byline on the book would be a plus. Well, I'm not a woman, and if I were to adopt a pseudonym, might there be some wisdom in taking a woman's name? Well, yes, there might be, but then that makes this kind of thing difficult. It makes it difficult to sustain that illusion in a book signing or a book talk or a podcast of any kind. And then you deal with the idea that people feel betrayed in some way. And I think that gets into the territory where I don't want to go. I don't want my readers to feel betrayed. They might not like my mysteries versus my true crime, or they might love my mysteries instead of my true crime. But I did it up front. I said, here it is, and here I am.
This is what I'm doing. Yeah. Okay. Well, it's interesting to me that the majority of true crime purchasers are women, and that I had already told you our daughters, three of our daughters are avid true crime.
Yes.
I wonder what that is. I know what it is with our daughters. We raise like these warrior women who are advocates for everybody in the downtrodden, and so they want to be a part of that that help for they really like cold case files. They like to be part of that, to help solve that, to maybe affect a change. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I wonder why that is. Are we all?
There are many reasons.
Thirsty?
And part of it is, I think it's without gender. Going back to caveman days, there's something primitive in us that wants to know the threats that are out there and wants to know how we can avoid unnecessarily dying from them. And at a very basic DNA kind of level, that's part of the appeal of true crime right now, because it's always been the appeal of true crime. Now, I think there are a lot of other things at work right now with media and the proliferation of different media. But I think at the very core, we're dealing with a very primitive reaction to understand the threats that are out there, to survey those threats, to prepare ourselves in some way to see them coming and to avoid dying unnecessarily.
There you go.
We have a comment from George. I'm not surprised by this comment, by the way. The women are doing research in case they decide to take out their ragtag husbands.
Well, there you go.
I know more than one man who has said that very thing, that I'm really my wife watching 24/7 investigation Discovery and a wall full of true crime books. Is she just researching?
Just researching, just messing around with it. Hey, Ron, everybody knows here that's watching that you're a New York Times bestseller. Can you kind of tell us about your journey from the big publisher to indie?
Sure. I referred to it a little bit there. But throughout my career, Death Row, which is coming in February, is my 19th book. Throughout my career, I've bounced between small indie publishers, medium-sized traditional publishers, and until the big ones. I've published with St. Martin's and Berkley and Prometheus. So I think that we are all in a period here where you go where they want your books. Now, my very first book was a literary novel, and a literary novel by an unknown guy in Wyoming just doesn't have that cachet that people want to, the editors want to go out and buy it immediately for big bucks. It sold to a very small startup house, traditionally published, but a very small house. Within weeks, I think about 6 or 8 weeks, the reprint rights, the paperback rights, were picked up by Berkley, now a Penguin Random House.
book was that?
That was my book, Angel Fire, which, again, we
There
had
it is.
37 rejections along the way until that sold. We were about to give up when it did sell. So
37. So don't give up, folks.
it's number 38. But the book goes on to be named by the San Francisco Chronicle as one of the 100 best novels of the 20th century West.
Wow.
Surprising nobody more than me, because we had sold this little book to a little publisher, and it was a little book, and it was not an important book. Well, it turns out that it had something more to it. Berkley picked it up. It became a very popular book. I wrote a couple mysteries after that, but it was book number 4 that set me on the path to becoming a true crime writer. And very soon, the success of The Darkest Night was, it locked me up. I then, the people we have on our teams, agents and editors and publicists and booksellers, they all want now more of what has succeeded, more true crime, to the point where from book number 4 to book number 19, I could only do one non-crime book, and it was really done without my team. I wanted to do the book. It was an important book, but I was forced to do it on my own and basically go out and find an editor in a house. I guess is a long way of saying that along the way from book number 1 to book 19,
Yes.
I've been with indies. I've been with big trade publishing, and each has served a purpose. Whether it's getting the book out there, whether it's a change in this case of genre.
Yep.
They have their strengths. They all have their strengths, and it's not good or bad. I don't have a preference. We all want to get our books out there. Yes, making money is nice, but if you're really a storyteller, you want that story to be out there. Think about
You
that.
want to tell the story.
That's right. And being a storyteller takes two. I tell it, but I need somebody to hear it.
To hear it, yeah.
That's right.
Otherwise,
if there's nothing wrong with journaling and diaries,
yeah.
But for storytelling takes at least two.
Yeah.
And it becomes very important to me every time I write one of these books. It becomes very important to me to think about who will be hearing it, who will be reading it.
Okay.
Joe Conjal has a question. He says, "Hi, Ron. When you are writing true crime, how much of the story is true versus embellished for entertainment value?"
None is embellished.
It's true.
I'm writing true crime.
True
It's
crime.
going to be true.
Yeah.
I write in a style known as narrative nonfiction, which means that I tell a story using some of the tools from a novelist's toolbox, foreshadowing and dialogue where it's possible, character arc. In my case, though, in the case of narrative nonfiction, that is telling an absolutely true story with those techniques so that it feels like you're reading a novel. But Capote invented narrative nonfiction with In Cold Blood.
Oh, yeah. Oof.
And he made some mistakes. Capote was a fiction writer trying to do journalism. And he had no roadmap. He had no rule book. He did what he did. Today we look back and we say, he made up a few things, and that makes it untrue to me.
Yes, it's no longer
Yeah,
nonfiction. It's
Exactly.
So
It's
what do you
not
believe in? Yeah.
nonfiction
What
if
can you
part of
believe?
it is fiction.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And this comes from my journalism. I can't make up anything. Now, the structure of the story is something different. And that's where I'm using those tools that I mentioned. And there are many. But it's unfortunate that a lot of people believe that narrative nonfiction introduces imagined things. And if it's good stuff, if it's honest stuff, it doesn't do that. That's
I
not to
think-
say there aren't those out there, but if it's good stuff, it doesn't do that.
I think it comes from people watching a lot of true crime shows where
Yeah.
things are dramatized, okay? And things are definitely hyped. I mean, we're paranormal investigators. We've watched a lot of the shows. It's a lot of hype. Yeah, we even know some of those people,
We know them,
and we know that they don't go, "Oh my God," they don't do that. I mean, you're out there.
and we know that some of the networks and streaming services,
production
companies have told them, you got to get some
you got to do
excitement
this.
in there.
You need to act
you know,
afraid. You're
to
not
sell it,
afraid, but
you
you
know,
need to
yeah.
act afraid because people want to think that it's scary.
Right.
Well, and
Instead
I've
of
been
boring.
invited to do television shows on true crimes that I've written about, some that I haven't written about, but they have to find their hook. They have to find that angle that's going to separate them from the last people who did an episode on Ted Bundy.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes without any moral or ethical journalistic grounding, they think it's okay to say, well, if it could be true, then it's okay. And I've refused to be on a couple of TV episodes for the reason that their hook was simply floating a theory and treating it as if it were true. And it just wasn't. Then that's not journalism, that's entertainment. And what I do in my stuff, in my true crime, I'm doing journalism.
That's the difference. Marjorie Deering had a comment. She said, I think a lot of the true crime interest comes from a genuine curiosity about the workings of criminal minds. And that could be too.
We need to take our break.
And they're all different. That's the thing. They're all different.
2 more comments, then we'll take a break. And we'll hear a word from our sponsors. All right. George Dismuke says theatrics is the first law of marketing. And yeah, theatrics is okay. You don't want to tell a story like this because they're not going to care what you're telling you.
Right, they're going to fall asleep or change the channel.
Right. Yeah. But there's a difference between theatrics and
making stuff up.
I think so. I think that making it interesting is important.
It isn't. Otherwise, no one's going to listen to your story.
Nobody's going to read it.
No. Joe Conjal said with true crime. What the heck is that?
You got George's.
A whole new genre.
I have George's disease. With Joe Conjal says, with true crime, do you ever have someone who is in the story that won't sign a release or changes their mind later? If so, how do you handle or get around something like that?
I've had people not want to sign releases, but I think that it's important too to know that I don't need a release on every single thing. A lot of the kinds of things that I'm writing about are in a public record of some kind. They're in a police file. They're in a courtroom, in a trial. They're in investigative files. They're in media in different places. So
you don't need a release.
You don't always need a release, but yeah, sometimes I have people that don't want to talk, and then I'm challenged then to find the information that they would provide, or not be able to report that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We're going to take a quick break now, just a couple of minutes. Don't go away, folks.
Don't go away.
Come back. We're going to continue
right back.
our conversation.
Thank you for joining us here on Meet the Author. Make sure you stay up to date with our show by clicking like.
Oops.
Welcome to Magnolia Bluff, Texas, a small town in the heart of the Texas Hill Country near Burnett Reservoir. A town where everyone's business is discussed at the local coffee shop. A town where neighbors look out for each other. A town not insulated from murder and mayhem. Which begs these questions. Who is responsible for breaking into quaint Victorian homes? And how are poodles, ghosts, drug cartels, and a Ponzi scheme connected with a serial killer? Caroline McCluskey, the town's librarian, catalogs books using the Dewey Decimal System. When a black and white poodle puppy arrives unannounced, she calls him Dewey. Now, Caroline must catalog events to identify a serial killer in her town. Pick up your copy of the Dewey Decimal Dilemma, now available on Amazon.
They thought the siren was dead. In the novel Siren Song by author George Dismukes, James Harmon shot her twice. Several people saw her dead body sinking slowly into the abyss. But now, in Siren Song 2, evidence suggests that she may still be alive.
She killed that boatload of people. It was her! And she's just getting started!
Angie, that's impossible.
The cold chill up my spine tells me it's not impossible. We've got to start all over again. And this time, do it right.
Siren Song 2. The story continues. Available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and many other bookseller websites. Get your copy today.
At Indie Booksource, you can shop by genre or by author, and you will be buying direct from the author's main purchase link. We offer hundreds of titles in formats that include ebooks, paperback, hardbound, and audiobook. Support an indie author. Visit indiebooksource.com today.
And we're back.
Yeah. And Rob was going to end the show quite early.
Almost ended the show.
He
That
said,
would have been too short.
do you want to hit that button? And he said yes. And I'm like, no.
So now we're looking for somebody who could actually do the job right. Oh boy.
We have a comment from Joe Conjol, and it's funny because we warned.
We
Ron,
told you this was coming now,
this
didn't
was
we,
coming.
Ron?
Okay, Joe Conjol said, okay, Ron, the most important question of the night. Are you a plotter or a pantser? LOL. Had you ever heard those terms before?
I had not, but
Okay.
I know what Joe's talking about. And it depends on the work. My very first novel, I outlined it endlessly. I'm a big believer in the hero's journey story model. And I really worked hard to plot this out using that model. To this day, somewhere here, I have, I don't know, might be a ream of paper. It's probably not. Drafts and notes and so there I was a plotter. I was really overdoing it. After that, it became more internalized. And then by the time I'm doing true crime, I really don't have to worry about plot. I know what happened. It happened.
Yeah.
I have no ability to change that. Now,
Right.
When I write my true crime, I'm trying to write a novel over which I have absolutely no control. It's in the way I'm telling it more than what I'm telling. And so in that respect, I'm a pantser. Although the amount of research I do, I would probably plop me down fully in the plotter category. But by the time I'm writing, I know how it's going, and it's just a matter of following along with the truth and the reality of what happened.
So pretty much your outline is the chronological order of things that have happened.
Sure.
Right? It's already written for you that way.
Exactly. And I might choose not to tell it chronologically.
Right.
But
Sure.
that's a function or a form and function a problem, right?
Right.
We're doing it differently. And by now, 19 books later, I've internalized that whole plotting process to the point where it's more instinctive now. So I don't do graphs and notes and have things posted all over. But I still am thinking about the roadmap, how I'm going to get from page 1 to page 500.
Right. And make it entertaining. So that, interesting, so people want to read it. I'll read you that one. Marjorie Deering said, Ron, have you ever written about a case that left you wondering if the criminal was actually innocent? That's a good question, Marjorie.
I've written about cases where up to a certain point, everybody believed the I don't know, not the criminal, the subject was guilty. But then I get to tell the rest of the story, so to speak, and show that he is not guilty. Mm-hmm. But I haven't written about any crime in which I think the criminal isn't guilty. I can't think of one. That makes me feel like the guy I wrote about isn't guilty and it hasn't been revealed yet. If I felt that way, I have a feeling I wouldn't write the story that way. I'd write the story saying, I think there's a lot of question about this.
Yeah. Gotcha. Well, let's tell people how they can reach you. Let's get your information out there. All right. Ron's website is ronfranscell.com, and it's RonFranscell. Okay. And you can find him on Facebook at author Ron Franscell, on Twitter at Ron Franscell, on LinkedIn, Ron Franscell. I'm really happy. Yes.
Let's hold off on the email.
All right. We're going to hold off on the email because
I want to talk here a little bit.
Okay.
Ron, I'm not sure. Which book did you decide to read from?
I'm going to read tonight from Death Row.
Okay.
Now this is coming. I
want everybody to know that this is the one that you're going to be giving away, right? In the book. So I want them to get a little taste of what they're going to be entering for.
This is Death Row, and let's go ahead and repeat again. This is actually fiction.
This one was fiction, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's informed by 15 years. Well, I was a journalist almost all my life. A friend of mine and I started our junior high school newspaper in 7th grade. So if you count my journalism career starting in 7th grade, I've been a journalist all but 12 years of my life. And through much of that as a professional, I was a police and courts reporter. So therefore, Death Row is informed by the reality of what's going on out there and of the true crime too. But it is a fiction. In the end, it is a fiction. There are a lot of interesting, real elements to it. And readers, when they finally get the book next month, and read through it, they're going to discover that there's maybe more than just a tip of the hat to real true crime. There's actually some real true crime bits of this story.
Facts in there. Yeah.
So I'll read from page 1.
Okay.
This is what a reader will see when he opens the book. The hero's name, by the way, is Woodrow Bell. His nickname. He's a retired Denver homicide detective. He wants nothing more than to just fade away and be done with people. But he is introduced to a particular crime that has haunted the little town where he's retired for a few decades. And he doesn't really want to be part of it, but there's something that says this is what his purpose is. This is what he was put on this earth to do, is to solve crime, and it's what he did for his life. Now he can't get away from it, and at this moment that I'm describing when I read, he hasn't gotten aboard, but this is where he begins to learn a little bit about this. So, chapter 1. Woodrow Bell checked his watch. Although he had no place special to be, nursing homes just made him feel the time was passing unusually fast. The big man damn near filled the cramped visitor's foyer as he surveyed the dreary day room of the old miner's home. The sun was going down. It was Sunday, and the two nurses were elsewhere. Pale September twilight swathed the cheerless room as white-haired shadows silently drifted in for dinner, like dust that hadn't yet been blown away. Now past 70, Bell knew he too was closer to the end than the beginning. It haunted him. It wasn't just the drabness of the old miner's home with its dog-eared furniture, folding dinner tables, and the giant craft paper calendar on the bulletin board that was utterly empty. It was the stiff knees, the hard mornings, the shrinking social circle, caring less and less about more and more, not remembering if it was the first time or the last time, getting up twice a night to pee a thimbleful, the AARP junk mail, the unreliable pecker, the fear that you can't finish Sunday crosswords because you have Alzheimer's, the daughter who never calls, the mystery of why you ever voted for Democrats, already knowing which suit you'll be buried in, and being invisible to the rest of the world. It all pissed him off most days. And today was one of those days. After months of making excuses, he'd been tricked by his closest friend, Father Bert Clancy, into visiting the old miner's home. It wasn't because the priest lied, not even because a friend lied, but because Bell didn't immediately realize he was being played. He especially hated that. In truth, the St. Barnabas Senior Center hadn't been the old miner's home since the Nixon administration. But everybody in the trifling mountain village of Midnight, Colorado, still called it the old miner's home. Good or bad, small towns seldom quit on a memory. So that's page 1.
Excellent.
Awesome.
And being people into their 70s with white hair.
You're the core market for this book.
Yes. Joe Conjal says, Ron, have you ever been approached by someone who was convicted whose story you haven't written about that wants you to tell their story?
Absolutely. Almost weekly, really. Maybe not weekly.
Wow.
Weekly, certainly.
Wow.
Everybody has a story.
Yeah.
And a few of them are worth looking at. But the fact is that all those years that we talked about as a journalist and as a writer, you come to learn that the people in prison always have an angle that they're playing. They always want something. Now, sometimes it's totally legit. Maybe they didn't do it. I don't know that a crime writer is the guy you go to prove that. If you have proof, I'm not sure a crime writer is the guy that's best to have.
It's going to help you, yeah. Maybe
yeah,
defense attorney might
really are others. And on the other hand, I've also written about in my book, Alice and Gerald, a homicidal love story. Gerald and Alice together and separately killed 5 people. It was, I've described it as boy meets girl, boy marries girl, boy and girl kill 5 people and live happily ever after. Alice died in prison, and that day Gerald wrote me a letter saying he knows he confessed to doing all these crimes, but he didn't do any of them. She did it. That's just provably not true. But that's part of what a journalist and a writer has to be careful about. You have to really, again, we get back to that ethical standard. Let me take a disinterested position. By that I mean as unbiased as I possibly can, and tell the story and not try to be an advocate one way or the other, because that gives you a blind sight.
Well, you got to give Gerald credit for a good Hail Mary there at the end, right?
Dead wives tell no tales.
It wasn't me. Now that she's dead, I can tell you the truth.
Yeah, dead wives tell no tales.
They do not. Marjorie Deering says that opening makes the character so relatable, and also so very authentic.
Very,
very real.
Thank you. That's nice to hear, and that's the point. In any storytelling, we have to have somebody that the reader cares about, somebody that's going to keep that reader turning the page and to find out what happens. And in the case of the protagonist of this particular story, that's necessary. You have to care what happens to him. And so what Marjorie's saying there is gratifying.
It's what every author wants to hear.
We need to take our second break. We're a little behind schedule here.
That's okay.
When we come back, we'll do our book giveaway right away, and then we'll do some more talking. Okay? And if I can do this right without acing us out of the entire program. So stand by, folks.
Madison Jackson loved being a cop. A young girl is raped and murdered near Burnett Reservoir. Madison vows to get justice for the child. Madison travels to the heart of Mexican cartel country. She is kidnapped, tortured. Will Madison ever make it home? Justice by Kelly Marshall. Only at Amazon.com.
Many secrets are hidden within the darkness of the jungle. Behold, this one about a man, a woman, a black jaguar, in an ancient Maya legend. Two Faces of the Jaguar is a novel by George Dismukes that will take you deep into the jungle and capture your imagination until the last word. Two Faces of the Jaguar is book one of a trilogy. Two Faces of the Jaguar, where only the adventurous dare to read.
Two Faces of the Jaguar, The Lost City, and The Jaguar's Quest are available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, and many other bookseller websites. Two Faces of the Jaguar, the book people are talking about. Get your copy today.
In a world where advancing technology is outpacing crime solving, the O'Rourke team continues their relentless pursuit of justice. Bioprints is the first book in the O'Rourke crime novel series where it's high-tech crime versus old-fashioned detective work. Visit carternovels.com or amazon.com and check out Bioprints today. And we're back. First of all, let's get your email up here for the book giveaway. Do you want to do the email?
Yes, I don't trust you anymore.
I'll go right over here.
I'm taking this back. All right. Ron's email is ron@ronfranscell.com. That's easy. And then the book giveaway, you may read that.
The first three people, U.S. only, to email ron@ronfranscell.com will win a signed paperback copy of Death Row after the February 14th, upon release, of course, after the release.
Yes. So you'll have to wait a while, but you will eventually get it. I do want to go ahead and put up that cover again. Let me find it. Here we go. Actually, that looks like that's a really good cover.
Can you describe the cover for us, Ron?
Pardon?
Can you describe the cover for those that are just listening?
The Death Row cover is a very cold feeling mountain scene with icy roads and a mysterious pickup truck on the road in front of us. And I guess the question will be, what is that truck and why is it up in the what looks like a coming blizzard? It's a very when I use the word chilling, and I don't mean it in the traditional mystery sense of the word, but because it just gives off a very cold vibe.
Yeah, it does.
Could you?
It's a really good cover.
Do you want to, first of all, explain the title? Because it sounds a lot like Death Row.
It does.
But there's a reason for that. But do you want to explain it, or
no? Is that a spoiler?
I don't think it's a spoiler.
No, it's not a spoiler.
You find out fairly early.
Though Woodrow Bell, who we met, again, doesn't really want to associate with people. He's the only people he associates with is a small group of 70 and 80 and 90-year-old guys in this small town. Every small town has this little group of old guys who gather on most mornings at the local diner to discuss what's wrong with the world and to fix everything and to poke fun at each other and sort of remember their glory days. He's part of a group like that. And the group of these white-haired old gents call themselves Death Row. And they end up playing the role of Woodrow Bell's forensic team, unwittingly and here and there. But because he's going to look into this case, and he no longer has all those resources that he had when he was with the Denver PD, each one of these old guys has his own contribution. And what's interesting about that is that it's the other side of this mystery. This book has two stories going on. One is this mystery, and it's a ghastly case, but it's about growing old too. I think it's been either the blessing or the curse of my writing career that I just don't want to do it like everybody else. And in my true crime, I've blended the journalism and the fiction technique and tried to do it a little bit differently. In Death Row, I'm trying to blend commercial crime fiction with a more literary exploration of men who are maybe they've outlived their best days. Maybe all the good purpose in their life is behind them, or at least they feel it is, that they're growing invisible to the rest of the world.
That's not a story that's told very often. You hear, people are put away into nursing homes and they get Alzheimer's and don't remember anything. Absolutely. So they just kind of fade away in the background,
And that's exactly it.
Yeah. My dad, and I'm still 10 years shy of when my dad did that, but my dad belonged to a group of men like that, didn't he? Yeah. And they met, the same old men met for breakfast every morning. He ate all the things that he shouldn't have been eating every morning.
And enjoyed it.
Yeah. And they solved the world's problems and complained about everything. And talked about their glory days and said the same things over and over and over again. And he drove me crazy.
Well, see, those are familiar people to all of us. We recognize them. And in Death Row, we have the retired newspaper editor and the retired town doctor and the retired fire chief and a high school teacher. Each one of them, through the story, brings some special sort of skill or talent to the table that moves the investigation, this casual investigation, a little further down the line. And in that respect, they prove they still have value.
I love the fact that your hero is in his 70s, because we're in our 70s. I love the fact that he's still making a contribution. And I love the fact that you're telling the truth. Anyone who reaches the stage of their life that we're in that says they don't consider their mortality is lying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you do. That is, come on. Everybody knows we have less time ahead of us than we have behind us.
Every day goes faster and faster, it seems like.
It does. It really
does. And we talked about it a little earlier, the market. And the market right now in big publishing is appealing to those female buyers that are out there. And mystery in particular has canted significantly toward female-driven stories. After my last true crime book, ShadowMan, we naturally took this new crime fiction to Berkley at Penguin Random House. And really, without reading the book, they said, the chances of it finding a home here are slim because we're going more with female-driven stuff. We went through a long time of glowing rejection. Editors out there who loved the characters or the writing or the plot or something, but it didn't fit their view of the book that was going to capture the attention of those female buyers. Ultimately, we found a home with Wild Blue Press, a very feisty, small indie publisher who's bringing out Death Row, regardless of it being largely about old white men. It has plenty of female characters in it, and then they're just as fascinating. But the core is that group of men. And so that was another reason why we ended up going with a smaller indie publisher, was because it served the book. The way we could get this book out there, the way we could talk to a reader was that way, was Wild Blue Press. And
you have to let us know how it does.
Yeah.
Because that is
absolutely.
I mean, I know a lot of people that are listening want to know how that does. It's Joe Condell says it's a great looking cover, and it is. It's a beautiful cover.
Beautiful.
And then Marjorie Deering actually has a question. More fiction in your future, Ron? Yay or nay?
Yes, there is, because I'm writing right now the sequel to Death Row.
Oh, good.
Part of the deal that there had to be another one. So yeah, I'm working on that. But interestingly, what I'm doing is I'm taking a real crime that I actually know about and fictionalizing it.
There you go.
My research is as if I were writing a true crime. But in this case, going back to that very first question we had about fictionalizing or making things up within a true crime, I'm going to write a novel that's going to have a great degree of truth.
Sort of like historical fiction crime.
Exactly. Exactly. I'm not inventing any new genre. It's just that that's something I wanted to play with, and I'm having a great time.
That's great. Yeah, that's really great. This is really an interesting concept, and I really love the way that opened, because was so relatable.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a man, but I am a white-haired old person.
But you know what? I've read books where women protagonists take front and center. I don't ever really recall thinking, oh no, I can't be interested in this because it's about a woman. And I think there's a certain shallowness in publishers saying, well, to get women's interest, we need to write about women. Certainly that will interest women, but I think it excludes the possibility that maybe they're interested in more than just the sex of the protagonist. I think we're not that shallow.
Well,
no, but the bean counters are.
That's what I was just going to say. Anyone that's worked in corporate America knows that, and the person that's out there that's doing the work, whatever that work is, actually knows what's going on. But there are the bean counters, and they say, well, you're going to do it this way. And it doesn't matter if you say, that's not the best way to do this,
Right.
And this is not a good move, and it's not going to serve our clientele or our customer, or, whatever part of corporate America you're in. And it doesn't matter, because they're the ones and that's who's pushing what you're talking about.
That's exactly it. The saving grace is that everything changes. Nothing stays the same. Eventually, someday, we'll come around to different ways of thinking about that. And but I think the reading public, especially today, where we have 1 million point something new titles every year,
I know.
we can't have 1 million point something of the same story. They have to be different.
Sorry about that editorial comment from Missy.
from the doggy gallery.
I don't know what she saw out there, but it did not make her happy.
I think to shift gears just a little bit, we have a lot of authors that are indie authors. And what advice do you have for submitting query letters, who to send them to where to get the information, the best formats and that sort of thing, to even how to do it. A lot of people don't know how to send query letters into publishers.
Sure. Let me rewrite your question.
Good. Thank you.
A little bit. Before you get to all of that, write your book. I get a lot of questions from beginning writers and young writers, not always the same thing, about stuff like that. How do I get a cover done, or who gets the blurb, and how do I find an agent? And almost always they haven't written the book yet. They're worried about things that there's going to be a lot of time to worry about later. Write the book. Practice. This is practice. This is, there's nothing but practice that goes into that. Like I said, if I go back to 12 years old, then I've been practicing for the last 50 years. And I'm still practicing. So you just have to do that. As far as the things have changed,
drastically.
It used to be that you get Writer's Digest and you could the literary marketplace and all of that, and get all the things you needed. Those things exist in different places and different forms. It used to be this sort of hidebound rule about the formatting of a query letter. You can do it with email now. There's you still don't want to go too wild, but there's a lot more leeway than when I first started off. Plus, I have an agent. I actually have 3 agents. Everybody's function is broken down between film and TV and literary and foreign rights and things like that. That's their job. So I'm left to worry about writing the book and being able to explain it to somebody. And one thing that I've learned is that if you can't explain your book in 50 words, then you don't understand your book.
Yeah.
True.
Okay.
And frankly, I have trouble doing that myself, boiling down into 50 words. But
especially when you go back, 19 books back, you haven't looked at it for a while, right?
and a lot of the marketing that goes on relies on people who don't read books. Hollywood people, agents, whatever. There are a bunch of people out there that don't want to read your book to find out what it's about. They want you to tell them in 50 words.
So a good summary.
Becca Jones wants to know, is it expensive to have an agent?
It's expensive not to have an agent, in the sense that a lot of money can be left on the table when you're dealing with a big publisher. And many big publishers, I think, are still requiring an agent to be involved. But the cost of an agent is plain and simple. They only get a piece of what they sell. In other words, if they get you $100,000 advance, in the standard fee is 15% commission. So they take $15,000 and send you a check for $85,000. You should never pay out of your pocket for any agenting, period.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good advice.
The people who say, give me $1,000 and I'll try to sell your book, are ripping you off.
Yeah.
Okay.
We've had agents pitch our books for movies and TV series in Canada and places like that, and we didn't have to pay anything.
Right.
Oh,
Becca, we didn't have a movie either.
Becca said no, we didn't, but they pitched them.
They did pitch it for us.
Yeah.
As long as they pitch them, that's fine. As long as they have some skin in the game.
Yeah.
They make no money unless they make you money.
Right.
And I should say they came to us and asked us, can we pitch this? And we said, go for it.
Go for it.
That's fine. That's fine. It's just that you should never take money out of your pocket and hand it to somebody who says, I'll be your agent.
No.
Right.
Legitimate agents work on commission.
Yep,
Great
they
advice.
do.
Great advice.
And Becca Jones says, thank you.
You're welcome.
Glad to know that. And Joe Conjal a while back asked if that was a delivery that Missy was upset about.
Some kind of noise out there.
Yeah, no, it wasn't.
Might have been a ghost.
It might have been a ghost. We've
Yeah.
been having stuff happening in our house all week. So, and I know a lot of you often want to know about that. And this has been a very active, haunted area. Cuckoo things have been happening. Very strange.
Changing
Gear completely.
gears again.
Mm-hmm.
You spent time with the Denver Post as a journalist, and you had to go over to the Middle East after 9/11, was it?
Yes.
And how was that experience? Can you tell us a little bit about it?
It was something throughout my life that I wanted to do, was to cover a war. And this was, we were, a photographer and I and some of my other colleagues were sent to the Middle East by the Denver Post after 9/11 to cover the run-up to the War on Terror. My particular assignment was to get into as many Arab and Muslim countries as I possibly could and report on the perspective from that part of the world. I also embedded with some units. I was aboard the USS Enterprise. I was with a couple of other units throughout the Middle East at different times, but primarily reporting from the street of what Arabs and Muslims were talking about. A perspective that we weren't necessarily that open to at that moment.
Right.
But the questions that we had were legitimate. Why us? Why did you do this? And of course, the answer is they didn't do it. The radicals did it. But they had a perspective that we didn't, that we probably weren't as attuned to in 2001 as we are now. On a grander scale, though, it was flying home after all my time there, and I was tired and I wasn't sleeping well on the plane, that I saw a French news magazine and was leafing through it. And I don't read French, but I can read French pictures. And in this news magazine was a picture that I hadn't seen. We'd left the country so soon after 9/11 that we didn't see a lot of the American reporting that was going on. In this picture were two people leaping from the World Trade Center holding hands. It immediately flashed in my mind the experience that I had as a child growing up in a small town in Wyoming, when my two next door neighbor girls were abducted and terrorized through the night, raped and murdered by being thrown off a very high bridge into a very deep canyon in the middle of nowhere. One of them died and one of them survived miraculously. And in my imagination, that picture was them. Now, they hadn't been thrown off this bridge together, but in my mind, they were linked. And it was the dark, the tiredness, the imagery took me back to that time when I was a child, and I determined there in the dark over the Atlantic someplace that I was going to write about that case. And I did, and it came out as the book, The Darkest Night, which, as I said, became such a huge bestseller that I couldn't do anything else. You can see on that cover the bridge. That is, in fact, the bridge. The two girls there. People like Anne Rule and Vincent Bugliosi were very, very kind to the book and very generous about praising it. So again, it became such a success that it was very difficult for me to do anything else.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's heavy.
Yeah, well, you brought it up.
I did. But thank you for
It's your fault.
That was my fault. Yeah. Okay. Now, you covered devastating Hurricane Rita also. So
I did.
on a lighter note,
I did. You know, those are the days in my life that reflected why I did it. And frankly, it wasn't the danger. It was simply to do something that not everybody else wanted to do, but they wanted to know about. And that was my job. I mean, I figured that was my job, and the more honest I was about it, the better. But the war experience was such that when I came home, it wasn't important to me anymore to cover the 4th of July parades or the city council meetings. Those must be reported. They're important, but I didn't have to do it.
Right.
I had covered war, and I wasn't even in the shooting part of it, but I was up against people who were afraid and who were fleeing things, and occasionally we were afraid. It just wasn't important anymore to me to want to report on the parades and the council meetings, because I had covered, I think, people in the worst moments of their lives.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's what we try to do in our books too.
Yes. George Dismuke says, fascinating show, very informative.
Thank you, George. Thank you, George.
And it has been very informative.
Yes, very informative.
And very fascinating.
Yes. Want to remind everybody, Death Row, coming out February. And it sounds like a fascinating book.
And you should email him to get your own signed copy.
I bet I already have a dozen emails at least.
Okay.
Oh, cool. Cool.
Probably. I don't know. I haven't seen. I can't see.
That would be great. But, don't give up, everybody. Anybody that, I'm sure Ron wouldn't mind saying hi anyway.
I definitely would not.
Let's see. One more. Okay. Marjorie Daring said, thanks for another terrific podcast. You're welcome. Joe Conjal said, really enjoyed tonight's show. Thank you, Ron, and of course, Rob and Joan.
Thank you, Joe.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
That is.
So unless you have anything you'd like to add, I think we're going to sign off for the evening.
Thank you for helping writers touch readers.
You are welcome.
That's the most important thing, and we've talked about that. That whole idea of storytelling takes two, and you're bringing the two together. And so thank you for doing that.
You're welcome.
You're very welcome. It's
really
our pleasure.
Our pleasure.
We're meeting a lot of wonderful people. So
yes, I really,
it's all good.
By and large, all the authors that we've met and that we know and that we've known some for years are wonderful, generous people. And
some of them are.
Most of them are so helpful. They want to help other authors. There's no jealousy or I can't help you because then, maybe you'll sell books and I won't. There's nothing like that.
Very little.
Yeah, it's amazing.
When I was writing that book, The Darkest Night, it made me nervous to say to Anne Rule, who we knew, we didn't know each other. Would you look at my book and if you like it, would you say something about it? I had no reason in the world to think she should or would. It was a nothing ventured, nothing gained moment.
Yeah.
And she did read the book, and she didn't have to.
Right.
And the same thing with Vincent Bugliosi, who wrote Helter Skelter. Both of them read the book and were very generous with their endorsements. And they didn't need to. And so, yes, writers are generous people most of the time.
Yes,
and I noticed
most of them are.
Anne Hillerman endorsed Death Row, right?
And Anne and I worked together as journalists years and years ago before either one of us had ever written a book. So, we're friends, we're colleagues, and her endorsement of Death Row was really nice. C.J. Box, John Lasqua, people like that. When they say, "Hey, you did a good job," it's personally gratifying. But I also know that you, the reader, it can be influenced by that.
Yeah. Well, we were almost done with the show, but Joe says, how does that happen? Do you reach out, or is that through agents?
He means,
The
did you reach out to Ann Rule yourself? Or
I did. I reached out to Ann Rule myself and to Vincent Bugliosi. Now, I have so many relationships throughout publishing, I can do that easily. But for writers that are just starting out and their first books are coming out, your agent can help, your editor can help. There'll be people like that. But also, you know what? Just take a header and write to Ron Franscell and say, I've written this book. No strings attached. Would you take a look and consider a blurb? And you never know. Ron Franscell might say yes. You just never know.
Oh, you don't know.
Nothing ventured, nothing gained.
As a matter of fact, one of the authors that we had on a while ago did that with Anne Hillerman, and she did. She read it, and she wrote a blurb about it. She wrote a preface to it. Even.
Right. Yeah.
So,
at the risk of flooding her email box, I will say that I know of no person, no human being as nice as Anne Hillerman is.
She is.
She is the nicest person, the
absolutely
most generous
is.
person I know.
Totally true.
And so please don't everybody write to Anne Hillerman, but read all of her books first and tell her how much you like them.
Yeah,
she's a wonderful author. She's been on our show, and she's an amazing author. And I was a fan of her dad's from his first book since 1970, and was very distressed when he passed away.
We used to search the library.
We used to
find his latest book.
I know.
Back in the day.
Back in the day when I couldn't afford to buy books.
Right.
And then when Anne decided to pick up where he had left off, I've read other authors that's happened to, and I won't name them, and it's been disappointing. Okay, Anne did not disappoint. Her books are wonderful. Her voice is different. Her POV is from Bernadette Manuelito, from a woman's point of view, and however, she doesn't take away from Jim Chi or Joe Leaporn at all. And it's amazing.
She preserved her father's voice.
Legacy.
She did.
And he's there, and his storytelling is there. But she brought something more to it. And frankly,
she did.
If Tony lived and if he were still writing, I would hope that he would evolve over that period of time, and maybe
I think
he'd be bringing those things. So I don't think, in her case, I think it's one of the times when it has really worked well.
Oh, so well.
She's improved his series, the franchise, and she's made it her own. She's not somebody trying to mimic Tony Hillerman.
No,
right.
but she did all of the readers a huge favor by allowing us to continue to read and see where these characters. I mean, I am so appreciative because I've loved every single one of those characters, and to watch them continue to grow and to continue their journey. We get to see their journey, and it's been a wonderful thing. But
think about what you just said in light of what we talked about earlier. That care that you have for a character or characters, and how it propels you through the story to the end.
Yep.
In this particular case, we're talking about multiple books.
Yes.
But you still care about Jim Chi and Jolie Porn and now
Bernadette.
That's the goal. The goal is to create real characters that people can care about, because they will carry everybody through the book.
Right.
You have to be emotionally involved with them.
Whether it's Woodrow Bell or Father Clancy or the guys of Death Row, I hope it's there. I hope it's in that book too.
Yeah.
Well, that character was very real, and everything what you read was so authentic. As I said, it was. You were really there. You know those people.
Really kicked it off. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. We live in that community.
Yeah, we do.
I think we all do. We can all look around and see those guys in the diner. And if
no, I mean they live on our street. We live in a retirement community.
Exactly. There you go. I think if Death Row works, if the book works, then people will look around in the diner and they'll see people and they'll think about Death Row, and they'll think about that inner life that's going on over there in the corner. And I just think that's the purpose of literature, to give us a different perspective. When we're done, we see things differently.
Yes.
And also, you know what? It will really help younger people who read it to understand and to be have more empathy for people who are senior citizens. And because it is true, I can tell you that when, I was a 30-year-old redhead, I got a lot more attention when I walked into a store than I do now. And that is no joke. That's the truth.
Yeah.
It's just a reality, a fact.
It is a reality.
You touch upon it, and maybe some people need to have more empathy for that.
Yeah.
Or just see things differently. Just be open to the idea that there's a different life out there. There's a different way of life. There's a different way of thinking. We've talked about that ourselves, and I think it's part of breaking down walls. It's just understanding. And that's the danger, is when a book like Death Row is a mystery, people want a kind of brain candy. They want bing, bing, bing. They want it to follow the kind of normal rhythms of a mystery. Then along comes this guy and says, well, yeah, I'm going to do that, but I'm also going to write about men growing old.
Yeah.
I'm in the sequel. One of them dies. And, so I find myself exploring how older men grieve, and especially how older men grieve among other older men. And trying to capture that, because I know it's different. And what does that have to do with a mystery? I not much, but
it is a mystery.
It's a subplot that I think is worth exploring.
Right.
That's good.
Okay, well,
this has been great.
Thank you for having me tonight. I really, really had a great time.
So did we. Thank you for being on the show. We appreciate it so much.
Hold on to your chair. I'm going to move you over to the side here. There we go. And, let's see. Okay, where were we?
I don't know.
Next week, Robin Madrich. romance author and slant, Joe Allen Ash, young adult author as well, will be here next Wednesday live. And
Who
Saturday,
feels comfortable having two brands.
Saturday episode rewind is Doug Cooper, 5:30 p.m. Eastern time, right here where you're watching the show right now.
Yeah.
And stay tuned for the information about Voice of Indie
At the end
broadcast,
of the
which has already started, I believe.
They have already started.
But hop on over there and say hi.
Yes.
Live every Wednesday, your Voice of Indie hosts Beam Weeks and Stephen G's welcome authors, musicians, publishing industry pros, artists, and assorted creative guests for an exciting interactive hour. Call in during the show or post questions and comments on Twitter for responses in real time. Meet your favorite indie creators, learn inside tips, network, and promote your work. The link for each week's show is pinned on Twitter atop @VoiceOfIndie. And you can receive the link every Wednesday morning in your inbox by subscribing to our newsletter at freshinkgroup.com. Check out Voice of Indie every Wednesday on Blog Talk Radio and catch hundreds of episodes archived everywhere from our websites to our YouTube channel and Spotify.
Thank you for joining us here on Meet the Author. Make sure you stay up to date with our show by clicking like, follow, and share. And you can find us on Spotify, iTunes, and more. See you next time on WLFE-DB.